Well, good morning and welcome to the Church Office podcast. If you're connecting via video, then thanks for joining us. We've got Ben Elliott on today, mate. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's fantastic and a real opportunity for us to have you, mate. You are involved in the whole church comms world and really looking forward to listening and hearing from you today of how we, as church administrator, or as leaders in churches, can really grow and learn and develop in this area. Ben, tell us a little bit about what you're involved in, mate, because you've got a number of plates spinning. You're involved with a huge range of people in church comms and churches. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you're involved in.
Yeah, I don't feel I'm too busy until people remind me of the things that I do and go, oh, actually, there's quite a lot going on. So, hey, everybody. My name's Ben Elliott. I live in sunny Sheffield in South Yorkshire. And my main focus, I guess, really 4 days a week at present is as the head of communications for The Well, which is a 6-year-old Baptist church plant in the heart of Sheffield. It's a really great church. Great to be a part of the growing team here and a growing church. It's been a wonderful 6 years. I've been part of the church all that time, but only for the last 9 months have I actually been in my head of comms role here, as it were. And then as well as that, I have a small agency that I run on the side called So Should We Talk, providing creative content, communication, consultations, web design, video, that type of thing, which is something I'm equally passionate about. And then in my spare time, beyond that, I run a thing called the Church Comms Collective, which ultimately is just a peer-to-peer support network for anybody involved in any aspect of church communications. They're the big three.
Those are your big three things. Yeah, I mean, I love jumping on your Social We Talk website and I love the fact that you kind of building websites with that idea of telling people stories and you come across a whole range of different things. So I love that agency and what you're doing there.
Thanks, man. There's an abundance of stories to tell, and often people just don't know where to start in terms of actually how do you actually present that digitally and beyond. Yeah. So hopefully, we help people to do that.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're still involved in kind of the business and kind of involved in the whole world, really, not just a church bubble of church comms, but you're interacting in different ways. And I think that's a real strength, isn't it, to what you bring then to the church?
Yeah, I think
what works.
Yeah, I think it's something which, to be honest, personal opinion, I think churches should be heavily involved in the business world. It's investing in people and their jobs and our localities, which in turn allows people to, I guess, live lives and things. But there's at The Well, for example, we run a few things, different mentoring programs where we've got a few successful business leaders in the church that are available for people to apply, basically seek professional advice, either startups or career changes and things like that. And it's like, how can we love others well and apply that in a context? You have to help everybody.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And then your Church Comms Collective stuff, UK, that you've got some like 1,300 members, mate, on that group. I tried to join a couple of months ago and it was like, you've got to be in church comms. I love the fact that there's a real clear definition. There's people in there who are doing this day in, day out for their churches or for Christian organizations. And the chat on there is great. And the, the ability to share information, share ideas, share what people are doing. Mate, you must be thrilled with how that's going.
Yeah, it's gone really well. And naturally it's blossomed a lot over the COVID times, and it's good that it's been there as a resource for people to use and draw down on. I think the nicheness of it is something which we can apply to all aspects of kind of communication groups. The strongest, healthiest communities are when they are gathered around a single core focus. And it's when if you expand that too far, that's when you can lose traction and things. But we've tried to keep it very niche, very focused. I guess in some ways it has expanded out into various different elements, but the vision for that ultimately started out of myself needing support, not knowing where to go to. There were some amazing groups in the US and things, but a lot of the content was contextualized to different cultures, and there wasn't a specific UK space to do that, which wasn't I guess just multi-denominational and kind of just drawing on lots of different ideas. So it's been a fantastic resource for me, and my desire is hopefully that I've heard from others that's been a blessing to them in that process, and that's just a winner all round. The big exciting thing I'm doing now is just thinking, is there something we can do beyond the closed walls of Facebook? Because that in some respects limits it to obviously people have Facebook as a preferential social media platform. So just exploring, putting tentative feelers out there to see, is there other things we can do to basically make this a wider resource, still niche, but in terms of the way that it's operated.
Yeah, and we've kind of crossed over, or our paths have crossed over, because I suppose there are church administrators, operations directors who, in the last 18 months are now, responsible for church comms, who might have hired somebody in the midst of all of this, or have just had to kind of get on and do it themselves and learn. And that's where we've kind of crossed over a bit, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something which naturally, I guess, from what I've heard from a lot of other churches, it kind of falls on the admin manager's role. And sometimes it can feel, if suddenly administration landed on my plate, I would not know where to start. I would be absolutely lost. So it's that thing of going, okay, simply how can, from a collective perspective, how can we help people who've got questions about how to do these things? And I think, I imagine a lot of church administrators are quite methodical and organized. Yeah. And the good thing with church comms is I think there is quite an organized process you can go about things to make it as productive and as structured as possible. Yeah. And hopefully for those who've had it in addition to their role, something that they can factor in without it, blowing their workload.
No, it's right. I've met loads of church administrators who are really quite creative, and but it's learning how to use all these different tools and be able to feel quite confident doing it. And I guess that's the bit that we've all been kind of thrust into and learning as much as we can. So from your experience and talking to people on your forum then and the network that you've got, I guess, is it typically bigger churches that are going to have somebody in a part-time role or in a full-time role in church comms? Is that what you've experienced?
I guess traditionally speaking, obviously the bigger the church, in theory, the bigger the budget to encompass staff teams and things, and there's key roles which are appointed. So naturally, I guess that is the case. But it's interesting that there's clearly an acknowledgement off the back of what's happened in the last 18 months of the importance more than ever of communications, and therefore churches are either looking to employ somebody for the first time, or really look at how they can build out their voluntary teams and things. But from what I've seen as well, whilst there's a lot of churches that are actually putting out these roles for the first time, which is awesome, there's actually there's just not the people to actually fill those roles with the skill sets. And when I say with the skill sets, I think there's people out there that will be able to do it, but they don't know that they could do it. I think there's things that we all, communication. Every single person in the world communicates, whether we like it or not. And it's applying the things we use in our everyday into a setting to help bring those stories forward and stuff. So, but I know when our church planted 6 years ago, it was with the ministers, and the first employee we took on was an administrator, because ultimately that's rock solid in terms of actually helping, the organizational side of things. You've got the leadership going on, and bit by bit, different ministries happen. And I guess the underlying thing that happens now in our church context is a lot of those ministries, to allow them the time to do what they need to do well. They don't want to get bogged down in terms of their communication responsibilities, which is where I then come in. And great communication and someone who can actually pull that forward allows the other areas of ministry to bloom and grow. So for me, it's a natural investment, because if you invest in that area, then everything else should grow off the back of that, because ultimately you're resourcing those people to be able to do their things as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, isn't it? Yeah. And I think churches, like you say, really have gone, man, we really need to value this. We really need to start thinking about how do we create, part-time roles, or voluntary roles. Somebody in the church could take this on in a voluntary capacity. And communication is such a challenge in churches, isn't it? Good communication helps a healthy organization, helps people feel like they're part of the family. They know what's going on. They know the right places to go and get information. And not just information, but stories. And I know you're passionate about that. We spoke to Joe before, that how communication is such a tool for the gospel, as much as it is just about informing people. And I love that kind of thinking. I love that kind of approach to churches.
Totally. I mean, very simply put, I say this quite a few times when I'm asking things. I tend to split my communication language almost and process into two key things. And one is to communicate and engage the people who typically would be in the sanctuary on a Sunday morning, in the cafe, those kind of conversations we'd have, and discipling and things. So that's one group. And then the other group is the people that would ordinarily walk past or drive past the building itself and actually be in the locality and maybe curious as to what's going on. Like, how can you as a church engage and talk to those people in a way which they would understand? So when they come into that next stage of being in the sanctuary, being in the cafe, whatever it looks like, that it's like a progressive journey. And that's the evangelism and the kind of, all of this different stage of the journey and things. So, but for me, church communications isn't just like, how are we going to communicate to the family of this church, but it's really to the locality and the community. That's the beauty of the church, isn't it? That we've got so many different expressions of what that looks like. There's no church that's the same. We're all on a unique spot of land, and from that place there's people with a passion for Jesus running. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think you're introducing a great topic there, just the kind of communication and evangelism and how crucial that is, isn't it, in the world now, of getting a message that is modern, in terms of it attracts people to it. People are drawn in by the pictures, by what you're saying, by how you're doing it. Those things are really important now for Church Sunday, to make it, to make the gospel accessible to some, that they don't just switch off.
I really think they are, definitely. I understand that all churches have necessarily got budget to do everything they want to do, but it's kind of thinking, what can you do with what you have? And we're fortunate that we've got people in our church that are passionate about going out on the street and praying for people and blessing the neighborhood. So we do things like, we've got simple flyers they can go out with, which are specifically branded as our church brand is around the well, so that when people see the signage out the front, and they see the poster out the front, and they see the banner out the front, and they've got the flyer in their hand, it all links together. It's those elements. And we present that as well in a way which, we're surrounded by pubs and businesses and university and hospitals and things. We want to make sure that contextually we're clearly a church, but at the same time we're clearly accessible, and we're not a completely foreign entity in terms of how we brand ourselves in that context. And I think, again, another beauty of the collective is, if you don't have somebody who potentially could help, actually in your church who can help with design and some of those things, there's people out there that are looking to expand their, either do it freelance or even taking their first steps into offering design services, and can do that, voluntarily and help you out. And also, just whilst I'm on that, from a design perspective, some people really don't know where to begin and how to go about it. One very great free resource for all churches out there is Canva. In terms of a design platform, I imagine a lot of administrators might use it as part of kind of things they might be doing. But as a not-for-profit, you can apply for the pro package for free, and you can kind of set up templates within there, and kind of key fonts that you might be using, and basically have a little brand kit set just to roll with. And it's something, again, you can access from your mobile phone or tablet or computer and utilize. So if you're not familiar with that, then I definitely recommend checking that out.
Yeah, I've signed up for Canva and have been using it just within the church office stuff, because we don't have a budget to keep on paying people to design stuff. You're trying to make the most of it and use of it, and free websites for images and those kind of things. And I know we have to be careful in those things, but these tools are stuff that if we can invest some time into in the week as church administrators or church leaders, and you might be just volunteering at your church and listening to this, then sign up for these things and begin to put forward some ideas, I guess, to your church leaders, because not all church leaders are going to take initiative, aren't they? And they're not going to think this way. They're thinking ministry, they're thinking about people, they're thinking about teaching, they don't necessarily think about communication. And there is such an important role, isn't there, to come alongside those ministers, those leaders, to serve them in this way. And I guess that's exactly what you're doing for your church, mate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ultimately, the gospel is a communication piece itself. And, I think I always used to, in my younger days, try and think that I was, excellent at everything and try and do everything and stuff. And actually, the reality of acknowledging your weaknesses sometimes and calling out the gold and the qualities in others to allow them to fill in the areas you're not so great is that's just running in your sweet spots and stuff. And I don't know what it is to be a church leader, because I've never been one. I've been a small group leader, but not a full-on, not a minister or anything. And the way, obviously, they're called into that position, the role that they do and stuff. And again, there's differences within how those people themselves. But I guess ultimately, it's I guess as part of their leadership position is thinking actually, ultimately, how do you want to equip your flock, and how do you expand that flock, and communicating well is so important. There's the old thing of not saying something at all is still communicating something. So there's always something to be communicated. It's just how you go about it.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Let's go back to a question or point that you raised about, there being applications and jobs out there now for people in these roles, but not enough people are coming forward. There's not enough fill in them. What can church administrators and church leaders be doing to equip people younger to give them opportunity, give them training? What are you doing in your church to pass on to the next generation this kind of role?
Great question.
Love to hear that.
It's actually the challenge that I'm facing right now, because we've got a healthy growing church. I think we're about 500 members now, and we have no one really on a voluntary kind of comms team as well. We've got volunteers that help come in, and this is how you can categorize stuff, and this is applying it into your church context. We've got guys that volunteer to help do the live stream and do sound and audio and things. We class that as a production team, whereas I would class the comms team as more people behind the creative videos, social media, photography, those kind of aspects and things. Now that currently we don't have any in mind. My big thing is like, how do we grow that? How do we find people who are passionate about it? And I think it's helping people to understand that, with one of these in your pocket, any of us could be a photographer if we wanted to be. Any of us can actually contribute to social as well. And it's finding out, is there people out there who want to be a part of that? So how do we do about that? Well, ultimately it's asking for a 2-minute slot on a Sunday morning just to say, morning, everybody. If anybody's got slightest interest in X, Y, and Z, come and have a chat to me afterwards. If you're online only at this time, then create a little video and ask it to be played on the live stream or whatever. If you've got an email system that you can use, I need to send out an email to our entire church family just to let them know. Part of the new thing, ways in which people can volunteer, is the church comes back together in the autumn. If you want to be part of the media team, we'd love to welcome you in. And I think, where do you start if you know nothing about it? Well, we've actually got this insane resource that I can't actually comprehend if I really stop and think about it, compared to what we had when I was coming out of school. But the fact is, the YouTube and Google exist today in the way that they do, and you could spend a couple of hours on there watching Canva tutorials, and probably do a podcast tomorrow, giving people downloading this information. I think one of the things, actually, the roles and the application thing personally is actually going, who can we find who has the potential to fill this? And they don't necessarily have to have the skills today, and to have the grace for them to say, we want to take you on, and we want the first month of your employment to be spending half a day on YouTube, learning things and applying it into a particular context, and actually doing that. And just by way of a bit of a background story, I started my first career out working for the police as a communications operator, and I ended up meeting a wonderful man who was a owner of a communications consultancy, who offered me a job to go to Australia to basically be a business development manager for his company. And the two worlds were so far apart, it was crazy. But he saw qualities in me, took that step of faith in me, gave me a few weeks of training before I packed my bags and went off to Australia. And the result was we had a very successful time and generated a lot of business. Now, my point being is, I think we can sometimes be very, job descriptions and stuff. We can be so specific about the essentials of what they need to be, when actually I think within church communications particularly, so many of these skills people actually have, but they don't realize it. We use phones all the time. We use various different digital devices. It's just helping people understand how to use those things simply to communicate the message of the church. That is one of the biggest ways I think we can help the shortfall, is by being gracious and looking, actually upskilling people. And we don't need to have people on team necessarily to do that. You can find out more from the Church Office, the Collective. You can go on YouTube. There's great books you can read, which are cheap. There's an abundance of information out there. So it's the willingness, I think, to go. Yeah, let's take a gamble on this.
And that's what church administrators are great at doing. It's kind of like mobilizing, organizing, and it just takes someone to take some initiative, doesn't it, to go, right, okay, I may not have all the skills to train somebody else in church communications, but I can create the context for others to come and hear that and learn that. And I would just encourage people, who might be listening to this to spend some time and reviewing, how can we involve younger people in this process? How can we train more? And there might be older people who have got time on their hands who actually would be really interested. We've got a guy in our church who's like 60 odd. He's just finished off an IT degree because he just had time to do it and just had a passion to do it. And it's finding out people's stories and interests, and in the church.
It's interesting, the whole age thing as well, because we can naturally assume that on one hand you've got young people that have grown up in a digital world, and using mobile and things is second nature to them, which is totally true, and they're very adaptable. At the same time, the baby boomers are the most as a generation have gone through more change than any other in history in terms of communication. Grown up maybe before TV, it's gone black and white. They've got the emergence of the internet and all these stages. It's wow, you guys have seen it all. And there's no reason why anyone from any generation can't step into this role, in my opinion, into these kind of roles, in my opinion. It's just a case of applying some particular the skills into that context.
Yeah. No, I love that. And what are you? I guess the collective is so helpful, isn't it, in terms of like getting ideas and starting points and looking what other people are doing, because it's that first step, isn't it? That first bit of confidence that we need. And I guess if you're listening to this and you're not involved in the Church Comms network, then please seek them out on Facebook and apply to be part of the group, and begin that journey to start connecting with other churches and other people. I know Ben's keen to see more people. You don't want people to be on their own in these roles, or who've got a responsibility in the church as a voluntary and go, I have no idea what to do, but I want to serve my pastor, I want to serve my church. These are the kind of people we want to connect into you, and an opportunity to learn so much there. So mate, that sounds great. And that's the best way to get through, is it? Facebook? Is that?
Yeah. If you go to thechurchcommscollective.com, the links for Facebook are there, and also a Clubhouse group which we're looking at hopefully starting out soon, and then potentially a new platform beyond Facebook which will be linked via there, basically. But that's the place where you can get the stuff. And ultimately it's about you're not alone if you're involved in any aspect of church communications. It's and I love that whole thing of, I remember the first time I joined a worship team as a kid and feeling completely out of my depth, knowing a handful of chords, and the most talented musician up there on the team wrote me a letter and just talked about the ladder, and we were all at that stage one day. And it's just you take that thing, and I think it's that thing of just going, it doesn't matter where you are, it's the heart you've got to bring to this. We can all move forward and learn along the way, and I'm still learning all the time, and I'll have to keep learning. That's just the nature of the way that things are so fast paced and changing these days, and that's one of the hardest things, I think, if I'm honest. That's the reason why the collective is good, because people bring ideas and help us be aware of trends and changes and things we need to do.
Absolutely. Love that. Now let me pitch a totally different question to you. Live streaming, I think one of the big debates happening in our church, and I know in other churches, do we continue this? People concerned about participation only being online and not in person. And I know a number of church leaders have been going back and forth on this, and not all church comms are happy with how it's going, I'm sure, and the decisions that are being made. Mate, what's your thoughts and opinions on that? How could you speak into that question?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I understand a lot of the fears around potentially people not coming back and things. There's so many pros and cons to the whole thing. Firstly, from research that I've read of churches that opened sooner, mainly in the US, they saw no change in terms of numbers of attendance in their congregations, even though they continued with the live stream elements. I think to some extent this last year and a half, that there's this awkward thing, isn't there, where I think some people might not come back to church whatever you did, sadly, and have been deconstructing stuff, and they choose not to come back. Others, I know in our context, others are actually coming to church for the first time because they've discovered the live stream during lockdown. They've never been to church before, and they're now coming to church to see what's this like. I'm aware for the vulnerable that who don't feel comfortable coming back yet. At our church, for example, we've restarted normal gatherings. We have we allow singing, and you don't have to wear a mask in certain parts of the building if you don't want to. So we are welcoming everybody. There's also a place for extra space and masks and things. So we're welcoming those back who just really missed that worship experience for the last year and a half. At the same time, we're providing an online experience. So for those who still feel vulnerable and not able to do that with us, we want them to know they're loved and they can still engage, and are very welcome to do so. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what does it mean to actually create a digital expression of church community and a gathering? Well, ultimately, for me, the reason to engage with that is for fellowship with others, to enable me to be better discipled, so I can be a better follower of Jesus and be more like him, and to give an opportunity to give God praise. Can you provide those things to somebody at home? I think you can. You can. A lot of churches using things like Zoom and stuff, obviously, for the whole community aspect. Fantastic. That might be different from a Sunday expression. That might be a midweek group, a bit better. And the Sunday focus being a more of a teaching and worship opportunity. But I just think it's what I've kind of called the glass house effect, whereby for the first time in history, the church, as walls have just completely come down, and anybody anywhere in the world could sit down on YouTube and potentially tune into a village parish meeting or church, whatever, in the middle of somewhere in the UK's countryside or whatever, and actually join the church community. And it's kind of crazy that really it's only just happened. It's a mass acceleration, which really the church has been slow to get on in terms of what's actually available to make these things work in tandem. But to me, it's a no-brainer to do. Now, I understand for some that logistics of doing that are hard, but I don't run the live stream elements of what we do here at the Well, but you can do very simple setups with a basic camera. You don't. If you are a small church, if you're a really small church, you can get away with using phones and things at the end of the day. But to me, it's an opportunity to share what God's doing in the community, and actually create another opportunity for people to connect and come in. And I think there's a thing really ultimately of leaning in God in this season as well, and going, let's love everyone as well as we can, and understand that, I think that there is a bit of a season of potential pruning going on, and we'll see, and off the back of it, hopefully we'll see a lot of growth. But it's doing what we can do and serving our people well. But where possible, man, if you can continue it, then I think it's a real added asset. And do you know what, one thing just to finish on as well is, if you're putting it on YouTube and things, and you're regularly able to apply those links to a website and stuff, that's just really awesome for your search engine optimization in your website, because it shows you're creating regular content, and all that kind of stuff's favorable to expanding reach and things.
Absolutely right. I think our live stream has gone further to different countries that may not be able to access content normally. We've had people, like you say, who have been quite vulnerable, who haven't been able to attend or fearful to attend, being able to connect still with church life. And I guess it's a hard call, isn't it? And I guess leaders will work through that. But I mean, you've given us a whole load of positive things there to help the discussion, mate, work these things through locally. And I think you're right. There is going to be a bit of a pruning, isn't there? There are going to be people who, even if you continue the live stream, may not return. I know for us, we've certainly experienced new people coming, and we've seen some people come to faith over online because they've heard the message, and just God's encountered them, and they've heard the gospel and changed. It happens, doesn't it?
It does. And I think it's really appropriate to consider your church context and who your people are and who you're trying to reach. It might be that live stream isn't the right way, but some of the digital expression is. It might be that actually, as a leader of your church, you record, a quick talk, and you apply some links for some worship, which you'd encourage people to watch and stuff as part of that, rather avoiding any copyright kind of things, and actually creating a bit of a study type thing, because I think we create for the medium in which we're using. So you wouldn't shape necessarily a in-person gathering around the same rules that you would apply to the digital expression of church. So that might be another way to go about things, and actually still provide a digital expression of stuff. One of the most powerful things we've done over the last year, I think, at the Well, was last summer. In fact, we created a series on the holy habits, and we asked a couple of the leaders here to basically talk on key aspects of the holy habits, and they would do like a 20-minute talk and create a load of questions off the back, which we have small group house communities and stuff, which we're meeting on Zoom as part of the COVID kind of guidelines. But the whole church was journeying together around these same questions, around these talks and stuff, and actually having the body moving together like that was really quite a powerful thing. And it's definitely it was a good wake up to us of, actually, this is a really valuable resource, really helpful to do in a smaller setting whereby you can have the conversations that we are today, one-to-one, so it's like, is there things that you can do to actually particularly allows for the elements of community, which is such a vital part of church itself, isn't it, as well?
It is, it is. Mate, that's fantastic. I appreciate your time in chatting to us, and I know we'll do this again some point, and want to keep pointing people in your direction to get support, particularly in these roles, and for church administrators and leaders that we're engaging with, then please listen into this and take away some of these things of the value and the importance of this role, and how that fits, and like you're saying, you're on this small piece of land in your community. It really takes some thinking, doesn't it, to go, what is our plan? How does this all connect together? And you don't want to be operating on the side as just a functional, here's how we communicate. But actually, you're talking about this role enhancing and being part of ministry, isn't it? You're involved in it because you love the gospel, not because you're just good at communication.
Definitely,
it's connected.
It's communications administration is a ministry, in my opinion. Like without, it facilitates these things. And I'd say as well, if you're part of a smaller church community, that the old saying of comparison being the thief of joy, not worrying about what some of those other churches which have got big budgets are doing, actually just going, what can we do right now? What's the best way to love and communicate to our people with what we have here? Use free resources available like Canva and Unsplash, and just ultimately as well, talk to your people, like what's the best ways to help them, and equip them as well for them to become disciples to others. Like, what can we do to do that? And that can be very simple things. Good thing as well, I guess, is ultimately, I think some churches would take the philosophy of, within social media, like, we have this particular demographic and they're not on social media, so we shouldn't use it. And that's maybe very true for helping them communicate about what's going on within church, but it could therefore be the perfect platform to communicate to people in your locality outside the church that are on it, and you want to
that's right,
bridge those gaps. So, and that doing that, the only cost of being on Facebook or Instagram or something like that is the time of actually posting on there and things, and it doesn't have to be that time consumptive. So it's but going back to what you said, it's understanding our context, who is it that we are trying to reach in our locality is so important. Starting from there is really key, really cool.
Yeah, mate, that's great. Well, man, thank you so much for your time, Ben. Really appreciate it. If you've got any questions, then please email them in to info@thechurchoffice.co.uk or questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. We'd love to hear them, and if there's anything we can help you to connect to Ben or connect to other churches, or, similar size, similar kind of roles, then we will do our best to do that. We'd love to hear from you in that way. Please check out the Church Office website for more resources. They're being updated all the time. Ben kindly helped us put together a head of communications job description that's available on the website. And these are good templates just to start you thinking, right, what do we need in our context? Who do we need in a part-time or a voluntary role or a full-time role even for some churches? These are good starting points for you to have a look at. So, mate, thanks for giving us the time to to put these things together. If you've got anything else that you want to add to the website, mate, please do. Things that will serve. Do take the time to send them over to us, mate. I'd love that.
No worries.
Right. Goodbye. That's grand. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, mate.
Thanks for listening, everyone.